Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here tonight. I want to share, like Stephanie said, I want to share information about the transition to adulthood process, because one of the hardest things we do as parents is to let go, to allow our children to stand on their own. Doesn't matter if they have a disability or not, but we add this piece of having a child with a disability. We have to navigate all of these other systems. And about the time we think we get comfortable, especially as me as a parent, about the time I felt like I got comfortable with the IEP process, all of a sudden they're talking about transition to adulthood. And so just a little bit about me. I am a program director at Families Together. I've been with the agency now. This is my 22nd year. I have my dream job. I was a former high school math teacher, and there's a running joke that I can't do math, so it's a good thing I have my current job. I am also the proud parent of two pretty spectacular young men, JP and Sean. Sean has autism and complex needs related to mental health and seizures. He has significant autism. So we've been down this road, and I know I have some of the similar feelings that parents are feeling. And I really think it's important for you to understand this process, as well as let's focus on that child, not just the process. And so before your kid reaches 14, that IEP team will begin planning for your child's life after high school. And so we begin navigating that transition to adulthood as part of the IEP process and searching for resources and supports that your child may need to be successful, whether they go straight into employment, go to college, or some post-secondary school. It's a scary time, not only for you, but also for your youth. We've finally gotten comfortable, and now we're looking at all of these adult services. So first thing I want to do is just kind of get an idea of who's here. And so I'm going to put up a Menti. And what I need you to do is, and you can put it in the chat if you prefer, is I want you to go to menti.com, and I'm going to show you a QR code here in just a second. Go to menti.com. and enter that code. And we're gonna use this throughout. This is kind of my, hey, let's get started to get you logged into Menti, because we're gonna use this for several activities throughout tonight. So if you will do that, click on that, put that link into your phone or your computer or wherever, or hit that QR code. I would appreciate it. And while you do that, just what is your role in supporting transition age students? Targeted case manager? Are you a parent? Are you a professional? Are you a school teacher? What is that role you are filling tonight? Because
will you go back to that number again real quick?
Yep.
And I'll put it in the.
I can put the link in the chat too.
Okay. I'm going to put it out on Facebook too.
Yeah, if I can find the, there it is. I'll say, where can I find the chat? All right. So one of the important things about transition to adulthood is also building that community around your child, building that, those relationships with people in the community. And so I always like to know who's here and kind of what those roles are, because everybody has a different perspective of that young person as you're moving forward. So, whoops. I will pull that back up real quick for those of you filling it out. And you can keep filling it out as we move forward. I will, we can go back to this later if we want to, but I think what's important is knowing that you're not alone in this process. And so as you fill this out, I want to give you a bit of good news personally. Today, Mr. Sean got a job. He will be stocking coolers at Speedy's convenience store. So we're pretty excited. He's got another job, and he is happy because it's doing what he loves to do. All right, we're going to keep moving so we can get to this content. Really quick, I want to tell you who we are. Families Together is the Parent Training and Information Center. We are federally designated by the Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level. And part of our funding comes from the same funding that funds special education. And it's mandated that every state have a Parent Training and Information Center. And Families Together has been the Parent Training and Information Center for Kansas for more than 40 years. You'll find us on the IEP. That's our role. We're parents helping parents navigate at special education, community resources. We're also the Family to Family Health Information Center, meaning we help families whose kids have special health care needs navigate those systems and understand their child's disability and special health care need. We serve families whose kids are birth through 26. Our wheelhouse is really birth through 21, but we also have some staff who understand those adult services and can connect you with the right people. Any disability, any special health care need, mental health, autism, cerebral palsy, ADHD, any Down syndrome, any disability, if they're between birth through 26, we serve the entire state of Kansas. We have two offices, one in Topeka, one in Wichita. We have a presence in Garden City, and we do have a program that we serve justice involved youth in Johnson County. But we serve the entire state. You pick up that phone and call us, and we're going to be there to help you. So some of the things that we do for transition age youth and their families, again, birth through 26, but we're going to focus on that transition. For families and youth, we will provide individual assistance. If a parent picks up that phone and calls us, that's all you have to do. There's no referral, there's no waiting list. If we can't get on the phone with you at that moment, we're gonna get back with you within 2 to 3 business days. And you will be talking to a parent or a family member answering that phone, have a conversation about what's going on with your child and how we can help you navigate not only your special education, but those community resources. We also conferences, workshops. We do a lot of person-centered planning. We have, and I'm going to talk about some of our trainings coming up, but we have some new podcasts, and I'll make sure Stephanie has the link to that are specifically for youth on developing mental wellness skills and setting goals. First one's on positive self-talk. And quite honestly, I found it helpful. And so we've got a lot of things that we do for families and transition age youth, which is 14 and up, and professionals as well, provide training and supports. We want families and professionals learning together. So before we dive into tonight, I want to show you where you can find all of these resources. And I do believe that Stephanie has sent this out to those who have registered. And so I'm going to put it in the chat for you as well. But you will find all of the resources that I reference and so much more related to transition here. And I'm going to tell you, transition is kind of my passion. I will also help families across that spectrum, but transition is my passion. Within the Padlet, if you scroll to the right, you're going to see that the list goes on and on the different topics. And then under any one of these, you can scroll down within that column to see more resources. So we're going to talk about life course and person-centered planning. Those resources and examples are there for you. The handouts are here, right here in the first one. And if you are not signed up for our Monday memo, and quite honestly, I'd like everybody to go in and sign into this sign-up sheet so we can make sure that we have your current information. So if you can do that, we'll make sure that you're getting all of our information. I wanted to point out 2 resources here. The first one under Kansas Transition Planning and the IEP, we have a new parent guide to special education out. And if you call us parents, we will send you this guide as well. But it has everything about your rights in here. And it also includes the transition to adulthood piece. KSDE has a booklet that they've put together on what parents and students need to know about transition services and the IEP. So those are 2 that I really wanted to point out to you. And so explore, it's going to be up here. The PowerPoint handouts will probably be taken down sometime soon, but the rest of it is yours to navigate, download, because you click on it, you can download it or it'll take you to a new website. All right, so now let's get started. And I did put that in the chat and Stephanie will share that as well. So what is our agenda? We're going to talk about this session. You know, like I said, our kids have had IEPs for a while, most of them, some of them may not. And we've learned how to navigate that. Now, all of a sudden, we've thrown in this new thing, transition to adulthood. And we want to talk about that tonight, what those services look like, because basically we're adding services to help your child be successful. That's what the IEP is doing. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the importance of student involvement, students' goals for after high school. What does that student need to reach those goals and who can help? And then we're going to talk a little bit about where they can learn. So what is transition planning? Again, it can feel like an overwhelming process when the IEP team starts to talk about transition to adulthood. It's important to keep the focus on what transition planning truly is. What is this planning? And what does that student want to do beyond high school? High school is not real life. We're preparing our students for real life. Where and how does that student want to live? And how does that student want to be a part of their community? Transition is to adulthood, as we're talking about it, is for every student who has an IEP who is age 14 and up, except those who are gifted. Transition planning is not a part of a gifted IEP. I mean, you can have these conversations, but it's not a requirement for students who are gifted. Okay, so what is transition? Prior to the student's 14th birthday, the IEP team will begin discussing the transition to adulthood process. It's going to be a new element that's added to the IEP. And we're going to add some components and shift the focus from those academic skills and those just focusing on what we're going to learn in this year. And we're going to shift that focus to how can we help the student reach their goals for after high school, their post-secondary goals. And we still have annual goals, but those are tied to those post-secondary goals. How do we teach them that? Let them learn, continue to learn that general education curriculum and prepare them for that life after high school. So IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The purpose of the act is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. The reason I wanted you to see this is because it's not just to prepare them for employment or college or one thing. It's to prepare them for life as an adult. And we're going to talk about how do we do that. So again, really quickly, I tell you your rights. I want you to know what the law says, but I also want to share some practical ways that you can be a part of this process. So again, transition is a part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Federally, it says age 16. In Kansas, we say transition starts at age 14. So a number of key words within that definition is coordinated. That means all of the activities within this IEP need to be coordinated. There needs to be results. It's got to be a results-oriented process and focus on improving that student's academic and functional achievement, as well as facilitating that student's move from high school to post-school activities, who they want to be after high school. All right, said I was going to throw up the Menti again, so I'm going to do that. And I will show you that QR code and put it in the chat as well. What are some challenges related to transitioning to adulthood? What are some of those barriers that you've experienced or those fears that you may have related to your child or a student you work with? What are some of those fears and challenges that you've, and guys, this is anonymous. Nobody knows who put what in. And so we really want to be real. We want to be real and relevant. So, because it's important for, if you put something up that a teacher hasn't heard before about one of the concerns you've had, it makes a difference. Cost, wait list, paperwork requirements, yes. Not being ready for that transition. Adult daily living skill level, yes. Behaviors, big one. Big ones. Keep them coming in. You guys are doing good. And like I said, you can put it in the chat and or Facebook if you want to put it there. Skills weren't taught. These are all real fears and real barriers that either families, other youth, or some of our professionals who work with them have also navigated and come up against. So I'm hoping as we go through this, we're going to talk about some of the strategies to help you overcome some of these challenges or barriers to successful transition. All right, we're going to keep moving. And like I said, that will be there. You can keep adding to it at any point. And I will send Stephanie a screenshot that she can share with you guys later. All right, so what I really wanted to share one of the biggest barriers to successful transition. Before we dive into this, let's think about that. If we step back and think about the skills that our youth need to learn in order to be successful in their community. One of those skills, and I hear it so many times, we have kids transition to high school and they'll say, he doesn't need this anymore because he needs to be independent. And so independence is one of those skills that we hear, independence. They need to be able to do this independently. But I'm here to tell you, independence, the definition does not mean being not dependent or not having to depend on someone for anything. We are all dependent on others for something. Every one of us depends on others in one way or another. We are all interdependent. Now, saying that, we need to teach our students the skills and the importance of being interdependent, the ability to ask for and accept help from others. But we must also teach them the skills they need to do tasks interdependently. For some of our kids, that's going to be with the help of another person. But it could also be now, man, there's some amazing apps. We've got some apps that we use for Sean to help him do the grocery shopping, to help him talk to Alexa because he doesn't have the verbal skills to tell Alexa what to do. So figuring out a way for him to be as independent as possible, but acknowledging that he does not have to be fully dependent on somebody. The reason I bring this up is when your student is in high school, they're legally entitled to a free, appropriate public education. When they step off that curb, you saw it in one of the concerns, was waiting list, cost. When they step off that curb, they've exited from 18 to 21 or graduated when they left the high school. They step off that curb, everything is a benefit. They may qualify, there are waiting lists, there are requirements. Nobody is guaranteed to get a waiver or SSI or anything like that. So we've got to give our youth the skills they need to be interdependently, because what happens when they leave high school, to step off that curve, we rip that special education vest off. And then they're left to just, if they're fortunate enough to have those adult service systems in place, good. They've got that additional help, but so many of our youth don't. And I honestly do not want to see youth graduating or exiting 2 services. Our goal is to access and graduate to real life like anybody else would. So just putting that in there. Now, how do you help a student who has more significant challenges be interdependent? Guys, use their strengths. If you learn nothing from me, focus on the strengths, interests, and passions. This is a picture of Sean when he was in high school. He was a volunteer. He had a friend who was a coach for a forensics team at a neighboring high school. Sean was a volunteer at their forensics team, and he would go in twice a week. Those students who wanted to be in forensic but were too shy to get up in front of people were able to give their presentations in front of Sean, knowing Sean wasn't going to judge them. He wasn't going to tell them what they did wrong. They would do that, build their self-esteem, and then Sean and these kiddos would do the Sean dance. But they were interdependent. They were dependent on Sean to help them with their self-esteem. So using those strengths and those passions of all of our students. And so that rolls me right into the student participation in the IEP. Transition of planning, again and again, guys, is all about what that student wants to do after high school. And one of the ways IDEA emphasizes the importance of students becoming more independent is by requiring that the student be a part of their IEP. When the IEP team is talking about the student's goals for after high school or services they need to reach those goals, the student must be invited to the IEP meeting. If the student doesn't attend, then the school must ensure that they include and get from the student what their preference, interests, and what they feel their needs are. Guys, your kiddo should be at that IEP meeting starting when they're in elementary school. And I get it, those IEP meetings sometimes can be contentious, so it may be a few minutes. But Sean would go to his, lay his head down on the table, and they'd say, Sean, what do you want to do? And he would say, McDonald's. But the team was focused on him. The team was focused on what he wanted to do, where he wanted to go. And he's hearing that. Get your student involved, whether it's, hey, let's create a PowerPoint or a TikTok video about who you are and what you want to do after high school. Get them involved at their level. Help them understand their rights. Give them choices on how they participate in the meeting. You know, they could lead it or they could just say, okay, I'm here. But give them that. And so if that purpose of that IEP, if the kid's 14 or over, and we're talking about post-secondary goals and transition services, they need to be invited to the IEP and be a part of that planning process. So the focus needs to be on self-determination skills. If your student does not have these skills or does not have the tools they need to be able to utilize these skills, these are things that IEP needs to be addressing. And I'm going to share more about this as we move forward. But self-determination involves many attitudes and abilities, including that self-awareness, assertiveness, creativity, and pride and problem solving, and self-advocacy skills to take charge of their own life. So for so many times we have families call us and say, the school is telling me I need to get guardianship. Kid's 16. Guardianship cannot take effect until a child is 18. They are legally an adult. But I'm going to tell you that there are very few students. Yes, there are students, and I do have guardianship for Sean because his needs are so significant. But guardianship should be the last alternative. Supported decision-making is an alternative to guardianship where students get to help from trusted family members, friends, or professionals to help them understand situations and choices they face. I'm not going to go into supported decision-making. It's a whole long discussion. I will share information about an upcoming workshop on that, but I need you to know that teaching your child self-determination skills is vital in order for them to be able to grow up and make decisions. And I want to share a tool. Families Together uses the life course framework. It was developed by UMKC to help facilitate positive thinking around person-centered planning, and it can be used, quite honestly, across the lifespan. But I want to share a few of those tools tonight with you, and these are on the Padlet. But this one, as we're talking about supported decision-making, it's so hard to think as a parent, okay, what kind of decisions can they make? How can they make them? Who can help them make them? And it's hard to dive down in these. This tool that I'm sharing with you has a list of different areas and then questions in those areas to where you can go through this with them, with the team, look at these. And guys, these would be great IEP goals as you're moving forward. Looking at this and saying, okay, which one of these are we going to work on? And that, you're looking at healthy living. that an IEP goal can be that they learn to make a doctor's appointment or fill a prescription. That's part of independent living. That's part of life. But so this, to me, is helpful to be able to look and see what kind of different things can we work on now. Under the advocacy and engagement, there's one on voting. Well, voting in high school, Sean came home and they said, hey, Sean voted for homecoming queen today. And it just took my breath away because he actually voted. And the thing is, for Sean, it was, how do you vote? Well, show him pictures, give him the information. And so he voted. Stephanie, are there any questions?
No, there was just a comment that Life Course is a wonderful tool. So I put the website in there and
Perfect.
hyperlink. So I'll send it again.
Awesome. All right. So the first step in the transition process is that student. Who is the student? Who is your young person? How do we figure this out, guys? To me, this is the foundation. All right. This is the foundation of that transition, the IEP with those transition services. What are their strengths, interests, talents? You know, so many times because Sean has autism, we're told that he obsesses about things. I'm sorry, that's a passion. I have things I obsess about too. So focusing on those passions that our students have to help connect them to their future. What do they want in life now or after high school? You know, what do they struggle with daily? And what resources are in the community to help? That we need to find that out as an IEP team. As a parent, as a community, we need to know that for the foundation of this IEP. So one of the tools we use, again, is that Life Course. And this is the portfolio. So I'm just going to show you real quick, because as a parent, so many times we get calls and I'll ask parents, okay, so what did you tell the school? What did you, as far as what his needs are, and they're like, well, we just went to the IEP meeting. Guys, you need to walk in with a list of his strengths, interests, and preferences and what you see those needs are. You've got to be an active member of that IEP. And when your kids transition age, hey, let's walk in with, have them fill this out with you. And this one is the family perspective. You'll see there is one that specifically says person's perspective. So here's a quick example for Sean. What do people like and admire about my family member? These are things that people say positively about Sean. And that, so fill this out with your young person. Have your targeted case manager fill it out. Take it. Quite honestly, I've done this, and then we gave it to vocational rehabilitation. We gave them to his targeted case manager. This way, we're moving away from that medical or educational model of deficits. And we're moving to person-centered planning and who that person is. We need to know what the needs are, but we need to base our future planning on strengths, interests, and preference. So here's the other couple of boxes, and I'm going to show you for Sean's. So Sean, we've always believed that he needs to live an enviable life, a life he would lead if he didn't have a disability, or a life I would want to lead if I had autism. And so that's what doing this person-centered planning, creating an IEP that's truly focused on helping that individual reach that good life, we can work towards that enviable life. And so also it's important for people to know best strategies to support him. Sean, like I said, he's starting his new job on Monday. There's one thing that you don't tell him if his voice gets loud, and that's shh or be quiet. You say volume down. If you know that to support him, he's going to be successful. And so giving people these quick bullets of how to support them. All right, so here I'm talking about knowing who your kiddo is. What does that mean? As far as the IEP process, that's the transition assessment. Transition assessments have to be done prior to the 14th birthday, updated annually, and focus on those areas of post-secondary education and training. So what kind of education and training do they need now and continue? Independent living skills, and we're going to talk about these areas deeper, and employment. They have to be student focused. That transition assessment needs to be student focused. It can be formal, written test, and it can be informal. But as a parent, I want you to know to ask what that assessment looked like. Sean's first transition assessment, literally, they came back and said he wants to work at McDonald's, he wants to work outside, and he wants to be a doctor. And I'm like, okay, how did you get that? She showed me 6 pictures on a piece of paper. And I said, when did you ask him these questions? And she said, well, and she told me the date. And I said, well, that morning he went to McDonald's. The night before, his dad mowed the yard. And this afternoon, he has a doctor's appointment. For Sean, that was not an appropriate assessment because he can't tell you in that way. So making sure that you know as a parent what that transition assessment is, what it looks like, and is it identifying all of the areas of strengths, interests, passions, and needs. And so that, again, can be written, it can be an interview, it can be on the computer, but it should be a multitude of tests, not just one, hey, we did an interest inventory. So really looking at creating that data. And it's important to think about the skills that the student will need to be successful after high school, including self-advocacy, understanding their disability, banking skills, accessing healthcare, along with those academic skills they need. All right, so we're going to go back to Minty really quick. And I want you to tell me, what are your students' strengths, interests, and or passions? And if you're a professional, what are some of those strengths, interests, and passions? And sometimes what we may see as a parent that we think, oh, this is going to be a barrier, may actually be a strength. So I'm going to put that in the chat again. All right, so think about this, guys. So many times, and I think my coworker Lisa's on here, and she probably could agree with this, is that so many times when we have families call us and we'll say, okay, what are your kids' needs? And they can tell us, especially if their kid's struggling behavioral, they can tell us all of these things that are going bad. He bites, he hits, he screams, he doesn't pay attention. Then we ask them what those strengths are, and we literally will get 3 or 4. And guys, if you are rattling off 15 of the challenges and only 2 or 3 of those positive strengths, that's the way other people are going to view your child. You've got to pull that function and that vision back to that student's strengths, interests, or passions. Friends, baseball, video games, following a visual schedule. These are good, guys. These are good. And I mean, just think about those strengths and those interests and passions. And I'm going to leave that up. He's friendly, visuals and routines, math and science, building and engineering, baseball, friends, following. These are good, guys. And it's important that you're focusing on those positives, because that's the way I want you to see me, as a positive person. Now, I got some things that I need to work on too. Welcoming to others, making money. Yep, making money. Sean will tell you he makes money to buy a Coke. Following directions, follows. Caring, good. Keep putting them in there. And again, I will post these to our Facebook page or give them to Stephanie. So I'm going to keep moving as much as I would like to stay there, because I think that brainstorming those and helping others see, they can say, oh yeah, my kid is good at this too. But we got to keep moving. So that transition assessment, it has to be age appropriate. And the purpose of that transition assessment is to provide information so that we can develop and write practical, achievable, measurable post-secondary goals. And identify any transition services that the youth needs to reach those goals. The school district, again, must do this assessment, age-appropriate assessment, a minimum in the areas of education and training, employment, and where appropriate, independent living. And guys, when I talk about post-secondary education, so many times post-secondary to means college, that means on-the-job training. We're going to talk about those different things. So when I say post-secondary education, I'm not just talking about college, because quite honestly, there are jobs out there that are starving for our young people and do not require any kind of college. So focusing on those. And so again, transition assessment has to be done prior to the age of 14 and updated annually. And if you're not sure it's been updated, ask for a copy of the results, have a conversation about it. All right, so skills that the students need for employment and post-secondary education. So when we're looking at this transition to adulthood and doing this transition assessment, the State Board of Education went around and did town hall meetings several years ago throughout the state of Kansas. The employers said, with over 87% of the employers said that non-academic skills, those soft skills, are the most important skills that a successful 26-year-old needs to be employed in Kansas. Those hard skills you can teach, but those soft skills, you cannot teach them as easily in a job environment. So we need to be working on those now. And if your kid struggles with any of these areas, making sure that that's part of that transition assessment to learn where they are, what's their present level in these areas. Now, all of our students are general education students first. They have access to and progress in the general education curriculum, no matter if they're 3, 6, 15, or 21. If they're still in the public education system, they have a right to access and progress in the general education curriculum, everything every other student does. Why do I say this? Because Kansas uses the college and career standards, company standards, sorry. And as part of those standards, that use one of the tools that they provide is called the College and Career Readiness Competency Wheel. I will put this link in the chat. It is on the Padlet under the Kansas Transition Resources. But the reason I want you to know where this is, because as you look at this, I can hover over each of these areas. It gives me a definition and it gives me resources based on the child's age and their disability. There's a few that are for purchase, most of it's free. So if my kid is having issues self-regulating his behavior, we're teaching that to all students. For some students, that requires additional learning and teaching. And so looking at this career and competency wheel, look at this, bring it to the IEP team, because quite honestly, I have heard, well, we don't work on those skills in high school. Those are skills that all of our Kansas students need. And we are working on that and teaching it. It's embedded in the curriculum, but for some of our students need additional instruction in those areas. So I wanted you to be aware of that and how to access that. All right, so we're in that transition assessment piece still. So as you're looking at that transition assessment, these are some of the other skills that your young person needs for independent living. And it's not just about cooking, cleaning, making a bed, doing laundry. It's about being a part of my community, understanding my healthcare needs, understanding my medication, emergency preparedness, boating, sexuality. All of these things, personal safety, are skills that a youth needs for independent living. And if they have that need to learn that skill, it can be a part of that IEP and how we're going to address it so that they can reach their independent living goals. So I did see, one of the barriers is behavior. And if your kid has behaviors that impede their learning or that of their peers, then the school has to do a functional behavioral assessment. And that's basically, let's look at this kid in all these environments and let's determine what the function of that behavior is. Let's determine what might be triggering it, what's causing it. Let's create a positive behavior support plan. If the student exhibits behaviors that impede their access to transition activities, those community-based activities, a functional behavioral assessment must be done, and that positive behavior support plan has to be created. This was an issue for Sean when he was in high school, and we had to ask for a functional behavioral assessment be done because they kept saying he was eloping. He was just walking faster than them. They didn't give him the verbal prompts he needed. But know that, guys, we can't just say his behavior is bad. He can't do this. We've got to teach him those appropriate skills. Okay, so we have a picture. We've done a transition assessment. We've done that person-centered planning stuff. Now we know who this kid is. Next step is, and guys, I know this starts at 14. These kids are always evolving, just like you and I. So things change. But what next we're going to do is we're going to talk about what those post-secondary goals are. What does your child, young person, want to do after high school? What is it that they want to do as far as long-term employment goals? What type of additional education or training? And that's not just tied to their employment goal, but that can be tied to their independent living skills as well. And do they want to live in an apartment? Do they want to live in a house? You know, so many young people are living more independently or interdependently thanks to technology. And so thinking about those, what is it that this young person wants to do after high school? So back to the life course real quick. And this happens to be probably my favorite tool. It's how do we get this student to the good life? We've got to identify it. If people don't talk about it, what the good life look like, or what the life I don't want looks like, then we're not going to know where to aim that trajectory to get that student. You know, we want to think of the trajectory as shooting towards the path they have chosen. And we need to be mindful of whether or not what we're doing in the IEP and in our community is nudging them towards that good life or towards the life they don't want to live. So here's the trajectory. To me, sometimes it's easier to talk about what I don't want. So I'm just going to show you really quickly Sean's example. And again, our team will walk through this with a parent. So what Sean doesn't want, not to be able to ride horses, not to have friends or be a part of his community, to be unhealthy, to be surrounded with people with low expectations, to work or to be in a sheltered workshop setting. These are things that he doesn't want. And you say, okay, well, Sean's nonverbal. How do you do this? Because you talk to those people who care for and about him. You watch him throughout his day. You listen to him when he's communicating in whatever method he is communicating. And that's where you capture what he wants. And so just because your kid doesn't have a voice doesn't mean they can't communicate. So then we're going to look at what you want. What do you want? What does that good life, vision for a good life look like? All right. So for Sean, it's to live in his community with the friends on a lake, own a boat and a horse, and have great Wi-Fi. Guys, that sounds like my good, but those are things he loves. Those are places he loves to be. And that's how do we get him towards that good life? And, you know, that working a job he loves. So now your turn, and I'm going to give that to you as homework, guys. It's on the Padlet. I think is your homework that you should go in and have this conversation with his team, with him or her. You know, your student has a voice, and in some way we need to be capturing what that vision of a good life looks like. So what I want you to do on this one is I want to know, what is your vision for a good life for your child or a student you work with? What is that vision? Just take a couple of minutes here really quickly and think about it. And if you can't come up with for them, what would be the vision for your good life? I think too many times we focus on singular activities and don't know where we're headed. And this tool helps you know where you're headed. So independence, yes. That ability to do things as independently as possible. Anyone else have any thoughts or ideas on what a vision for a good life would look like? Stephanie, I know that Matthew's good life is being a cameraman for the Royals. So that is his good life. That's what he wants to do, to enjoy leisure activities. And you know what? Those leisure activities are so many times left out of an IEP. And that's something that should be included. And it shouldn't be coloring papers, because we've got a couple of kiddos in an 18 to 21 where their leisure activity is coloring, and that's not what they want to do. It's just the easy thing. Having physical needs met, yes.
Yeah, Leah, I don't know what I did. It wasn't working. So yes, he wants to be a cameraman for the Royals. He wants to have independence and living on his own, be able to still go and hang out with his friends on Tuesday nights and Saturday nights that he has a group of, have a season pass to Worlds of Fun every year.
Oh man.
You know, getting to go to Universal Studios in Florida once a year. I mean, there's just so many things. But my favorite that when we did this with him, my favorite, what he doesn't want is a pet snake. And I said, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I'm with you on that one. All right. Choose how to spend time. And I think that's so important, is those choices, giving them choices. And, you know, a lot of times it's win-win choices. You know, I'm going to give you 2 choices that I know are safe choices and you're not going to get hurt. But we're also, I didn't talk about this back, and thank you for reminding me, is that we have to work on these self-determination skills, because we need to let our students fail while we're still around and while they have people, because so many times we coddle them in that life vest and we don't give them opportunities to fail. We've done transition panels across the state. We've done these powwows and everything, and people are always talking about, you know, they're sharing their great ideas, and I love it. But the youth are saying, my mom doesn't let me fail.
I think
And
they deserve the absolute same opportunity we do to make stupid decisions every once in a while.
Exactly.
And learn
I'll
from
remember
them.
that next time you tell me about one of Matthew's.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Have a family, good. Having physical, these are great, guys. We're going to keep moving. And like I said, you can keep adding to those as well. So this is just an example of Sean's trajectory. And this tool is on there. You can see this, and this example is there to kind of help you. Sometimes we think these things are complicated. It's not, it's a conversation. And that's when families call us. We have a conversation about what's going on, and then we're going to brainstorm and try to see if we can help you. So we've done that transition assessment, right? Now we're looking at, what is the student wanting to do after high school? What are their long-term goal for employment? Do they want to go to college or a university? What other training opportunities? And
hey, Leah, can I just,
yeah,
sorry. I just want to make one suggestion, whether it's working with families together on doing these forms or not, but when you're sitting there thinking about what your good life is for your child, I think you should, especially if they're verbal, you know, and you're married, both the husband and wife should go in 2 separate rooms, write their stuff down, come back together and see, oh, you know, see where there's differences. And then when you're doing it with your child, this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever had to do, but keep your mouth shut.
Yep.
And let them talk.
Yep.
Don't put ideas or words in their mouth. Find out truly what their thoughts are. And then, you know, after a bit, you can add some things in, but I do want to just kind of say that.
No, and I appreciate that. I think some of the most important things that we have to do is listen. And, you know, like Stephanie said, if you're married, husband and wife do it. Guys, or, you know, your partner, you 2 partners do it. Siblings are vital in this. Other people, I will give it to everybody who knows and cares about Sean in the community, even if it's somebody he meets every day at Quick Trip. We give it to them and say, hey, fill this out, or, you know, just give them some bullet questions. Can you email me these answers? Because everybody sees the person in a different light, but then bringing that person into it and really listening to what they want to do. What's that goal? Where do they want to live? Where do they want to participate in the community? And so many times we hear, well, you can't do that. We'll hear, I want to be a professional football player. You're never going to do that. Well, guys, he may never be a professional football player, but if we shoot in that direction, teaching him the skills he needs, especially those soft skills, then no matter where he lands, he's going to be prepared. And maybe that's in that getting him into the world. I had a young man I worked with who wanted to be a professional dirt bike rider. So we sit down and we went through and I said, do you have a license? No. Do you have a bike? No. Do you know where to get a license? No. Do you know where they ride? Well, I kind of do. We went through all of these different things. And then we got him involved in that world, and he was really good at taking videos. So he started taking videos of them. They started engaging with him and started buying his videos, teaching him to work on the bikes. So he was in that world. He never became a professional dirt bike rider, but he was one of the happiest people you would ever know because he was in the world and in that area where he wanted to be.
And that's what I just put into the chat, Leah, about how, and you know this, Matthew always wanted to be a pitcher for the Royals. But when we realized, that probably wasn't going to happen, he still wanted to be with the Royals, but how? Yep. So now it's as a cameraman. He wants to be as a cameraman for the Royals. So he's still there with his team. He's just not playing for them.
Hey, he's in that world. And
so
to
I
me,
think
that's
a pitcher would be a better paying gig that could take care of his mama, but
So we've done this. Again, transition assessment. Now we've identified these post-secondary goals in training and education. What kind of vocational or career. Now for that 14-year-old, that goal may say that he wants to work with animals. But as he gets older, it's going to say, I want to be a vet tech. And it can change. Our goals change. How many of us have the original job we thought that we wanted to do after we got out of high school? And so, looking at employment, paid, competitive, with or without supports. Okay. Every person is employable. And if you've not attended our FEAT training, we will make sure you're on that list so that you get information about how to work, maintain needed benefits, and have the supports you need. Okay. And then we're also talking about post-secondary goals in independent living. And we kind of touched on these, but these post-secondary goals have to be observable, measurable, results-oriented, based upon the student's strengths and areas of need. Okay, so what do they want to go? What are those strengths and interests and passions? So here's a couple of examples. After graduation, Tony's going to work as a welder. You see, it says after graduation. When you talk about an annual goal that's in every IEP, that annual goal said within the school year, Tony will learn to, that's going to be your annual goal. Post-secondary goal says after high school, after exiting 18 to 21, what will Tony do? And so here's a couple of additional examples, and you guys have these PowerPoints on that Padlet, so you can pull them up and look at it. And again, Families Together, I don't want to keep blowing our horn, but guys, the reason I'm sitting here is because Families Together was there when I needed them. But if you want to brainstorm some of these and have us look at that IEP, so many times families say, well, I don't have any post-secondary goals. We can help you identify and learn where those are in that IEP. All right, so here's a few more examples. So post-secondary goals, for examples for education and training. And you notice one is going to be on training to be a fireman, training in the retail industry. Sean has on-the-job training. Okay, so these are what after high school kind of education and training do I need? And I can't believe I don't have, well, I do. I'm sorry, I'm talking ahead of myself. So post-secondary goals for independent living, and a post-secondary education and training goal could be that Lisa's going to learn to use Lisa will use public transportation to get to her job and community activities. And so then we need to have annual goals to teach Lisa to use that public transportation in a safe way. And that may be actually getting on and doing it, or it may be teaching her the skills to safely be there with all those people. So here's some independent living skill goals for independent living. And so many times we see IEPs that only have independent living post-secondary goals for those with more significant support needs. The IEP legally is required to have 2 post-secondary goals: education and training and employment. Independent living post-secondary goals are when appropriate. I'm going to tell you personally, I believe every student should have an independent living goal. I think every high school student should have an independent living goal. And if you just look at the last one, Terry will advocate for accommodations needed on the job and in the post-secondary training activities. That's a post-secondary goal every one of our students with a disability needs to be able to do. And so think about that as you're building that IEP and you're talking to the team. So we've done the transition assessment. We've got a good feel on who this kiddo is. We've talked about and we've developed post-secondary goals for education and training, employment, and independent living. Now we're going to talk about what will help the student learn. Those coordinated set of activities, those transition services, so that we can facilitate this student moving forward. And so transition services, this is one of those vague things out here that can be more challenging to understand, and it's usually listed in a grid on the IEP, for the most part. Transition services are experiences, supports, instruction, or classes. What does the student need in order to reach those post-secondary goals? What do they need now? And what are they going to need after high school? So looking at that, as we talk about that, secondary transition services, again, includes activity strategies or services to help them achieve those measurable post-secondary goals. The IEP team has to decide these services, identify these services prior to the student's 14th birthday as we're developing this IEP. Now, the primary piece, when that student hits 14, the primary piece of the transition services that you're going to hear about is courses of study. That IEP will list the courses of study that student needs in order to reach their ultimate goal, those post-secondary goals. Those can change every year. They're fluid, but when you're talking about courses of study for those students who are academically not able to perform at that high school level, the IEP team can determine how they're going to get those credits. Sean got his math credit by working in the coffee shop. So as a team, you can determine those. And so that course of study is going to be identified. You're also going to identify, as part of those courses of study, the instruction and what instruction does the student need in order to complete the courses or to learn those skills they need to reach the post-secondary goals. Related services, those are OTPT. Let me move forward so I can show you what I'm seeing here. Related services, OTPT, speech, do they need them now? And yes, they can continue to receive them in high school and in an 18 to 21 services. And also identify, do they need to continue those after high school, and who can provide those? Employment and adult living experiences, acquisition of daily living skills. And for some of our kiddos, we're going to need to do a functional vocational assessment to get a better handle and a better understanding of what those employment skills are. What are their skills? What are their needs? And what do we need to focus on? So, quality employment transition services, an example. Community-based work experiences while the student is still in high school. That is quality services. And guys, this happens with our general education students as well. The general education students are getting these opportunities. So our kids with disabilities who are general ed students first should also have these opportunities. We also want to develop those self-determination skills and interagency collaboration. I'm going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. But leaving school, the best quality service you could have is leaving school with paid permanent employment. Because the last day of high school should look like the first day of real life for these kiddos. What are not quality services? Developmental approaches that focus only on readiness. For some of our kids, I got to learn it in the community. I need to be accessing and doing it. And if you give me the right accommodations and supports, I don't have to learn to count money. So many times we're still counting, learning to count money when they're in high school. If Sean didn't have it by then, we're going to teach him to use a bank card, because I don't want to be that person standing behind somebody writing a check in Price Chopper or Walmart. And so I don't want people to get upset with Sean. So we teach him the readiness skills he needs. And then not a quality service is preparing students for day service or sheltered workshops or waiting lists. There are going to be many of our students who are in day service programs when they leave. But guys, that is not the dream. That is not the enviable life or the good life. We want to focus on Corey is going to work with animals. Corey is going to live interdependently in her community. Corey is going to have additional training, on the job training. It should never say that she's going to a day service, because we don't know, quite honestly, who's paying for that day service is one of the things. If we're on wait lists, we don't want to prepare them for adult services. We want to prepare them for real life, knowing that that's a possibility for some of our students. So why do I say this, guys? In Kansas, it's an employment first state. We have a law that says competitive integrated employment is the first option. KSDE, in that transition guide that I pointed out, says that competitive integrated employment must be the first option to consider in transition planning process for the student. Competitive, making minimum wage or higher. Integrated means in the community, working with people with and without disabilities. Not a sheltered workshop. A goal in the IEP, a post-secondary goal, cannot say that the student is going to go to a sheltered workshop. So just putting that out there, and there's a good resource for you on that. Some examples of services, transition services. These things could happen while they're in high school, getting on the job training. And this is in the IEP, a technical training in it, internships and apprenticeships, think college programs. Guys, if you have a child with an intellectual developmental disability, you can go to Think College, their website, and there's a list, and there's a lot of different programs across the country, and I'll let you guys explore that. But just looking at this, we have general education students who are attending community college while they're in high school. Your student can also do that. Tie it back to that post-secondary goal. We also want to collaborate with adult service providers, because, as much as I don't want to prepare students for services or eligibility requirements, we also want to utilize the resources they need. And then that collaboration with local businesses and communities for volunteer opportunities or paid employment. That, to me, as a parent, that's one of your jobs, is to build that capacity in the community. Open those doors, let the school know, hey, look, he's always in here. People know him, people like him, he enjoys being there. Let's try to get him a community-based work opportunity there. We did that with a therapeutic ranch, where Sean did every morning as part of his transition. He went and fed and watered the horses. The para took him, they went, he did that skill. We opened that door for him to do that. And so really thinking about that as a parent, how can you help build that capacity? Some independent living transition service examples, community training. You're out in that community learning to navigate the community. Guys, the high school building is completely different than Texas Roadhouse. The high school building is completely different than that cafeteria in Texas Roadhouse. It's different than McDonald's. It's different than standing in line at Price Chopper or going to the movies. I need to experience those sensory changes and the social expectations of my community to be able to transition successfully as an adult. And so just looking at some of these different areas and those independent leisure skills, having those skills are vital for our kiddos. So we've talked about who the student is, what their goals for after high school are, what's going to help them learn. Okay, those transition services. And like I said, there's a list of those, some example transition services on the Padlet that can kind of help show you how they're worded. And then we're going to talk about who can help. We know we have an IEP team. We know we have the family and that young person. So are there people outside of school who can assist the student in reaching their post-secondary goals? Think about the student's needs. Think about the student's strengths. Think about what they want to do after high school. Agencies may provide core services, financial aid services, intensive supports, pre-vocational skills, or training services. In case of students, when a student reaches 16, we start adding transition interagency linkages. And I'm going to tell you, even from the State Department down, because we're part of planning to help change the face of transition, make it better, make sure schools have the supports and training they need to ensure our young people are reaching their post-secondary goals. One of those areas of need is this interagency collaborations or linkages in our IEPs. So there are agencies outside of school who can assist the student in reaching those goals. We're going to start talking about this at age 16 and up. You can start talking about it before that too, but so this is an important step because you're also making that bridge to those outside community agencies, not just having things in that building, because what is in that building or what's in that school ends the day they graduate. So the IEP team can include representatives from community agencies who can help pay for or provide services, help them make connections between what's happening now and the students' post-secondary goals, help them reach those post-secondary goals, and identify any other agencies or supports that may be necessary. Some examples of those interagency linkages are vocational rehabilitation. And vocational rehabilitation can come in as early as 14 now. They've changed that. Before it was 18 months before a student graduates. Pre-employment transition services. If your student has an IEP and they are 14 years or older, pre-employment transition services needs to be invited and involved in your child's education. Look on the Padlet, there are some resources on that, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. But that is for all students. You know, vocational rehabilitation is more about getting that job. Pre-employment transition services is about working towards that job, learning those soft skills, and it's also about paid work opportunities. Workforce centers can provide great resources. If your kid's going to post-secondary education, having a representative there, representatives from these various agencies. You know, if your kid's on a Medicaid waiver, somebody from the managed care organization, each one of those managed care organizations, Aetna, Sunflower, and United, all have transition and employment teams, and that transition person can come to the IEP meeting with you. So if you've got a targeted case manager or a care coordinator, ask them about that because they know. I mean, Sean's came to his IEP meetings. But then assistive technology agencies, your community mental health, employers, community members, people from the Independent Living Center, and I could have conversations about each one of these at length, but think about linking to those people outside. And so even your community members can come. Now, we want them to be a part of the IEP, but like I said, Sean and the ranch, they weren't a part of the meeting, but they were providing the location. They were a linkage because they were providing access to that location. So now the next we're going to talk about really quickly is where will the student learn? We've done the transition assessment. We know who the kiddo is. We know what they want to do after high school, those post-secondary goals. Talked about those transition services and who can help besides the IEP team. We also want to talk about where that student will learn. And for students who are 18 to 21, 14 to 21, I'm sorry, and we're talking about transition age, those skills can be taught in the classroom, in the school building, in the community. And so we have to look at the least restrictive environment in the law says that a student will learn where they would be if they didn't have a disability to the maximum extent appropriate, alongside their non-disabled peers. That's what the idea says about least restrictive environment. That also applies to our students who are transition age. Okay, so that IEP team must consider any supplemental aids and services that can be provided to allow the student to participate in a community-based activity with work placement with peers without disabilities. But it doesn't have to be just work placement. It can be going shopping. It can be learning a leisure activity. All of those skills, if I need to learn it in my community, and I need to learn it in the way that I would be learning it if I didn't have a disability. So learning that, and in that least restrictive environment. So this is just a resource that's on the Padlet for you. And it's a way to brainstorm, okay, in the community, what does my child need to learn? He needs to learn to fill a prescription. Where can that be done? At the local pharmacy. Who can help? The pharmacy tech. You know, if you build partnerships within that, at Walmart, Sean can walk in and they'll say, what's your birthday? They know him, and he'll say August 5th. He's able to get his prescriptions independently. His personal care attendant is with him, but he's able to get those just like every other person. And so thinking about those skills your young person needs to learn, where can that skill be learned or practiced, and who can help with that? Sean has all the pharmacy techs wrapped around his finger. So really quickly, I want to show you, as we're talking about this interagency linkage and where in the community, our Together We Can Learn conference is coming up on September 17th. There are several things that I think would be perfect for you to attend if you're into transition or interested in transition. But one of our breakout sessions is going to be done by Jen Bumble from the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. And she's going to talk about community mapping and how to map your community in a way to where you can include all of these different agencies, these different services, and these different people in your community visually. And so I'm excited to be able to sit in on it. I've sat in on a couple of her things. So if you are interested in really building a community around your kiddo, I would suggest coming to the conference, if for nothing else but for that. Our keynote actually is talking about disability inclusion, and he is passionate about employment of people with disabilities. And so there's a lot there, and we do have some scholarships. If you can just email me, and I'll give you my email address later if you're interested in that. So what is the last step in the transition process? It is a summary of performance. I'm not going to go deep into the summary of performance. Your student, every year we're going to either update that IEP. Now, if they're getting ready to graduate or exit from those 18 to 21 services, we are going to need to write a summary of performance. The school is. So when they graduate from high school we're going to write this summary of performance that final year. And on that summary of performance, well, here, before we move to that, if the student will continue to need special education services, we're going to update that transitions assessment, revisit and revise post-secondary goals, update the annual goals and any other services in the IEP annually. If the student is graduating or exiting, we're going to do the summary of performances. So the summary of performance is a description of the student's academic achievement and functional performance that must recommend how to assist the student in meeting their post-secondary goals. Now, this does not include gifted students. Again, this part of transition. It's recommended how to recommend and assist that student and be developed the student's final year of their high school. It also needs to be information that will assist the student in meeting the disability documentation to qualify as a person under a disability under other federal laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act. A student can utilize this form to help apply for Social Security, to help apply for other services. Now, they can't use it to get the services, but they can help use it as documentation to help determine their need for it. But they can also, if they choose to self-disclose, they can also share it with employers or others so that it's a good snapshot. And it's, we've talked about creating portfolios for students. And, it's almost like a resume, but something deeper to show why this student is still a student with a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And KSD has some nice resources, and they're on that Padlet. So then we have graduated and exited services. So the first step was, who is a student? What are the student's goals for after high school? Okay, the transition assessment. Let's just move it this way. We got the transition assessment, post-secondary goals, transition services and activities, interagency linkages, least restrictive environment, and summary of performance, or rewrite that IEP. That, guys, is transition in the quickest nutshell I can put it. I've got a few more things to share with you.
Hey,
But-
Leah, there was a
Yes.
question.
Uh-huh.
Sorry to interrupt you, but there's a
No.
question. Can you restate the transition and employment resources available under MCO again? What is
Yes.
available for those that are not Medicaid eligible?
Okay, so for those who have Medicaid and have a Medicaid waiver, an IDD or TA waiver, there's different Medicaid waivers, and Stephanie can probably dive. That's a whole nother workshop and there's waiting lists for those too, up to 10 years. But who have those waivers, the MCO has an employment or transition services, especially under that IDD piece, that can come to that IEP meeting, can help brainstorm, can identify other resources that are available. For those who are not Medicaid eligible or don't have the waivers, you have vocational rehabilitation, you have pre-employment transition services, you have your independent living centers, you have your workforce centers. And again, I would be happy to visit and kind of brainstorm what those services are with each of you. Did that kind of answer the question in a quick nutshell?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so really quickly, my least favorite part is asking you to tell me how I did. But for our grants and stuff, we have to have this information. So I put the link in the chat and it's on that same Menti. So if you can go in and just answer these questions, and then there's a little bit more that I want to share with you. And you're not,
And if you are on Facebook, the link and the number was put in to the comment section in there as well.
and I can put that QR code back up for you so you can see it. So it sees I can be an auctioneer and say, I've got two people, I've got two people. If you could fill that out, anybody could fill that out, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps us understand, are we giving you what you need? And I've got a section here in a minute, I'll let you add comments too. But earlier I said, so while you're doing that, earlier I said that sometimes what we see as a barrier is actually a strength. And so while you're filling that out, I'm going to show you a slide. Keep filling it out, even though you can't see it on the screen, it's still there. If I do it right, guys. Okay, this is Sean. And Sean's favorite thing to say is do your share. Yep. He took a job. He took a job at Legends Honda Toyota. And Sean hates anything that's perceived as cleaning. And so after 6 months, I had told the owner, Deuce, when he started, I said, hey, look, here's the barrier. He likes to yell, do your share very loud. And so maybe it's an outside job we need. And Deuce says, you know what, let's do it when we have the least amount of customers. And if customers aren't happy, they can find another day, which the guy is, I love him. But so 6 months later, Sean is not happy because he does not like the tasks that are perceived as cleaning. It's not his dream job. It's not his good life. So I sent Deuce an email and thanked him for the opportunity. And he responded back and said, what you thought was a barrier taught us more in those 6 months about team building than I could have ever taught my staff. We start every staff meeting by saying, do your share. You do your share, I'll do my share, and our customers will be happy. And to me, that says it all. Sometimes we focus so heavily on what our kids can't do and what people might think of them that we lose sight of the gifts that they have to offer. Sean will sing in the community. Verbal stems if you're but he will do that. And people will turn around and say, Sean, what are you singing today? Because we don't act like it's something different. It's part of him. It brings joy to him. It brings joy to others. So I'm encouraging you to do your share, as well as focus on those strengths, interests, and passions. And then I'm going to go back and I want to see how many of you guys have done your share. Hey, I didn't know I was going to do that one. All right. So I got 3, Stephanie. 3 people filled out the eval. Maybe it.
Hopefully there'll be some more.
Yeah, hopefully you can, and this will be up. You guys can do it when we get off too. So
it is totally anonymous, and it is just takes a few seconds to give us feedback and letting us know that we're going in the right direction.
So while you're doing that, Families Together, again, here are our contact information. And you can reach out to any of these numbers when you call us. And I would say call the Topeka number and we're going to get you to who you need to go to. Come here, Sean. Mr. Sean decided to join us for a second, but can you say hello? Hey, can you say hello? There you go. Yes, you could.
Say, do your share.
Yep, he came to steal my Coke. So again, there is the Padlet link, and I'll put it in the chat again with all of those resources for you. And there is information about Families Together and how to connect with us. I'm going to put up. All right, let's see. Where's my chat?
If you have any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself, put them in the chat box. We do have a couple of minutes left. If you are on Facebook and have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have about 5 minutes left.
All right, I put up another Menti for you if you had any final thoughts or questions or ideas. And these can be for me or Stephanie about topics that you want to hear later, or things that you wish you'd heard today, or things you heard and you were excited about. Oops. All right. So if you could do, now this, we're going to see the comments up here on the evaluations. We hid those results so nobody could see what was coming in. So if you have any questions, comments, and then just to show you, I talked about earlier the different workshops transition related. We have an Empowering Families workshop series. It's virtual. And guys, this is transition related. We're going to talk about special ed law, your rights and responsibilities first. We're going to talk about IEPs on September 15th. Those 2 are for everyone. Then you get down to this October, the last 3. We're talking transition. We're talking transition to adulthood. We're also talking about self-determination in the IEP. And we're talking about supported decision making. We've partnered with KUUSED to provide those last 2. So you're going to hear from Shada, Riley, and probably some self-advocates on those 2. And then we have a shift transition to adulthood in August. In Hayes, our Together We Can Learn, and then our education advocate trainings. So I'm going to get back to that Padlet so I can show you where you can find those there.
While you're doing that, Leah, I just want to share with everybody that I put in both in the chat on the Facebook and then chat here on Zoom that Kansas Lend records all of these sessions, and then we archive them out on our YouTube page. So you can go out there and find older sessions, different topics. And again, the topics that you're might be asking for, you might be seeing next year. So I am definitely in the planning stages, and I want to make sure that we're getting you the information that you want to hear as well.
Yeah, I like this, and I
That is
appreciate
what
the fact that we have an early childhood special education teacher on here.
That's awesome.
Thinking early, starting transition when these kiddos are little. We do it for all of our kids. How to support daycare providers. These are for you, Steph.
Yeah, we actually have a new series, the Kansas Len Childcare Trainings. For daycare providers, we do intellectual and developmental disability related topics. And if you're interested in that, you can always email me and I can get you on the list. You should have my email address if you received the email to get the Zoom link. But I will put it in the chat. But we're hoping and we're doing some research behind that too. Because I know one of the things, and I'm sure Leah had felt this pain as well, but as family members, finding daycare has always been a struggle. So we want to make sure that we can help families find daycare that has been trained on supporting our kiddos.
So you were reading their mind already, Stephanie.
Oh, no.
And then if you go onto that Padlet, scroll down the third column, and you're going to see the different workshops we have coming up and trainings. And all of these are free except for our statewide conference, which is $35 to help pay for our keynote speaker. So guys, join us, please, at any of these events. Reach out, call families together, and you can learn more about families together here. I'm going to give you my contact information. Nope. Oh. There's my contact information. I will put it in the chat as well. But, you know, we have a lot of staff members who are very passionate and knowledgeable in helping families wherever you are in your journey. And again, you don't have to get a referral. To be frank, if a special education teacher or a targeted case manager or anybody sent us an email and said, hey, we've got a parent we want to talk to you, that parent must call us or email us. And so our team is there to help families throughout, and no cost to our services, no waiting list. And so we're here to be families helping families. And any last questions, comments, thoughts? You guys have been awful quiet tonight, so I'm hoping somebody was actually out there, Stephanie.
There was quite a few people on Facebook, and I think you've just been doing such a great job, Leah, that you covered everything for people. So I want to thank Leah for coming and presenting this. And I do ask that you do support Families Together if you get the opportunity, but they provide such wonderful information. I was telling Leah before we got on tonight, I'm like, why do I have to recreate anything? You guys, that Padlet is awesome. We're definitely going to be using it in our clinics and sharing it with families. And, you know, they keep it up to date too, which is always a barrier sometimes when things change so rapidly in our worlds. So, and they do a fantastic job of keeping up with it. So
Hey,
I
Stephanie.
do highly suggest that. Yes, ma'am.
I also want to point out, if KSDE has a transition newsletter that comes out quarterly. It is coming out on Monday. So if you go back to that Padlet and you enter your name and email address there, and I'll put it up there again to show you where it is. But if you go there, yep, there we go, and enter your name and email address, I will make sure to send it out to you on Monday. And just forward it to everybody on this list, because I've seen it and it's got some great information. You ask about vocational rehabilitation, we ask about pre-ETs, and there is some invaluable information even from the benefits specialist, talking about how you can work and maintain needed benefits or how to navigate those benefits. So if you're interested, go to the Padlet and click on the sign up link and just fill out that quick survey. And I will get that to you on Monday.
Great information.
It's
So,
a secret.
well, we are over time, so I want to thank you all for attending. Our next session will be September 8th, and it will be led by Sean Swindler, Brad Lindenkamp, and Evan Dean from the Kansas University Center on Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the UCED over KUCDD in Lawrence, and it will be on employment, transition into employment. So it'll be more about their research around employment. So I hope you can join us. We'll have more information in the sign up coming out here next week. So everybody have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you for joining us. Thank you.